So behind us is Battleground Cemetery, and it's a location where the Battle of Lundy Lanes occurred, which was one of the bloodiest battles in the War of 1812. So let's begin our tour. So they say the cemetery is where the battle actually happened. So it's called the Drummond Hill Cemetery. And in the center you have a monument. Well, it says here, Drummond Hill Cemetery, War of 1812, site of the Battle of Lundy's Lane, July 25th, 1814. So you have two cannons out front. You have a memorial commemorating the battle. And it says, erected by the Canadian Parliament, 1895. So here they said 50 soldiers died and about 800 casualties. And a lot of these soldiers were buried on this site. And here is a memorial to Laura Secourt. So this was interesting because in June 24th, 1813, because she traveled 32 kilometers to warn the Canadians, or the British, about the American invasion, the British were able to put together 50 men and convince 540 men of the U.S. Army to surrender. So it's a very important part of Canadian history. I feel that a little bit more should be mentioned about Laura Secourt. So in 1797, Laura Secourt was married to James Secourt, a Queenston merchant. Queenston is now part of Niagara-on-the-Lake, an interesting area to visit if you're ever down here. Early in the War of 1812, James Secourt was a sergeant in the 1st Lincoln Militia. He was wounded at the Battle of Queenston Heights, and Laura Secourt rescued him from the battlefield and took him home to nurse him through his recuperations. In June 1813, with Queenston occupied by the American troops and James still recuperating, the Secourts were forced to house some American soldiers in their home. Somehow, Laura heard that the Americans were planning an attack on the British forces at Beaver Dams. Since James was still recuperating and unable to make the journey to warn British Lieutenant James Fitzgibbon, she set out on the journey on her own. On June 24th, 1813, the American troops were ambushed near Beaver Dams by 400 Mohawk warriors and 50 British soldiers. The Americans then surrendered. Walk around the cemetery here real quick. A lot of the tombstones, you can barely see any markings on them, so you have no idea who they belong to. It's just the rain and the weather wore the chiseling out. This one has the top of it broken off. This was the site of Cecil Bishop, Lieutenant Colonel Cecil Bishop, who died of wounds received during the raid on Black Rock, New York, July 11, 1813, during the War of 1812. He was buried in this cemetery July 17, 1813. And in 1846, his two sisters erected this memorial to his tribute. and the inscription they wrote said, "An excellent man and beloved brother." In case you were wondering where Drummond Hill Cemetery gets its name, it is named after General Sir Gordon Drummond, who led the British Army at the Battle of Lundy's Lane on July 25, 1814, and this hill is where the heaviest fighting took place. This little community evolved into a sizable village, and in 1831 was christened Drummondville. In 1904, it was annexed into the city of Niagara Falls. I feel I also need to mention who General Sir Gordon Drummond was. He was Lieutenant Governor of Upper Canada and distinguished himself on the Niagara Front in the War of 1812, and later became Governor General and Administrator of Canada. He recaptured Fort Niagara, defeated the Americans at the Battle of Buffalo, and led the British forces in the Battle of Lundy's Lane on July 25, 1814. The American Army was led by Major General Jacob Jennings Brown. Brown commanded 3,000 men, while Drummond held on to 2,800 men. Each side suffered more than 850 casualties, making Lundy's Lane the bloodiest battle fought on Canadian soil. So we got a lot of names here, but the ones that you can see the marker of are not from 1812. So like here you have Thomas Morrison from 1856 and 1932. So what does it say here? It's the Drummond Hill Presbyterian Church. Now the church was built in 1887 by A.J. Lowell, and the current church was modernized in 1961. So, William Dalton was responsible for keeping the burial records. So he might have a separate book somewhere of who those tombstones that are unlegible belong to. So there's the Presbyterian Church. Ahead of us, and I don't think the original church is here anymore. So it looks like the granite tombstones hold up pretty well, the limestone ones don't. Milton Glasgow, 1852 to 1933. It's a big tombstone like that. I'm sure he was pretty important. Right, so let's head over to Lundy's Lane. And across the street is a tavern that was turned into a museum. It has some relationship to this battle, but when I looked online, it said it was only open from May till August, and we're now in September, so that building is now closed. And you can tell by the window shutters that it's closed. Yeah, so right ahead of us is that old tavern. So that concludes our trip to the Battle of Lundy's Lane in the War of 1812. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.